Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this class today, which is Microsoft Word Basics. My name is Rachel Vingsness. I'm the Director of Career Development for the BRAC Center at Natick Service Council. And today we have Sarah alongside, who will walk you through Microsoft Word and everything you need to know to get started within Word. So Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Rachel. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and coming to learn a little bit more about Microsoft Word. So I know that some of you may have used Microsoft Word before, but if you haven't, we are starting right from the beginning. So we're going to start with the real basics here, starting off with what is a word processor? Microsoft Word is a word processor, and it can be used for all sorts of things. It's really made for any sort of writing exercise. Anytime you would use a pen and paper, you could use Microsoft Word. So for instance, you might decide you want to do some speech writing, or you might want to write a letter or take notes or make a pamphlet. You might want to draft up a speech or an email. You might even decide to use Microsoft Word, and often people do, for your resumes and cover letters. That's the most common tool people use to draft all of that stuff up. So Microsoft Word is used for all of those things. So definitely something that you should try, anything that you're able to do that for. Now, you might be asking yourself, and a lot of people do, well, most of those things I can do with pen and paper. So what makes Word better than that? And there are a lot of benefits to using Microsoft Word instead of using just traditional pen and paper. One of them in particular, I have terrible handwriting. Some of you may have great handwriting, but I have absolutely horrible handwriting. And so Word evens that all out. So everyone has the same handwriting. You get to choose a font, and usually we just say to choose a font that's super readable, and you don't have to worry about reading whether or not a word was written correctly. Another great thing is that when you go to make changes, you can make a change without having to rewrite the whole thing. I know my parents have talked about writing college essays on typewriters, and if they realize that one of the words was wrong, they end up having to type up multiple pages all over again just to do that one word, or doing very careful whiteout and things like that. This is so much easier for those quick on-the-go edits. You can make some changes. And the other great thing is that you can work with other people. In a business environment, often you might write something, but then a whole bunch of people have to look at it and give you feedback on it. And so this allows you to get that feedback by everybody looking at the same document. And then you can make changes right on the fly without having to rewrite everything every single time. So really, it's a time saver more than anything. So we're going to take some time here and we're going to practice together. If you haven't already gotten the practice document from the Natick Service Council, please reach out to your contact there so that you can follow along. They'll give you a link to this document that I'll be using today. But we're going to jump in and really use Microsoft Word here today. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we are using the desktop version of Word. That means that when I look at my computer, it's available either at the bottom of the screen or in an icon when you're searching. You might be searching for it and be able to find it from there. One thing to note for any of you using a Chromebook, you may have something that looks like this but doesn't have all of the same features. So just something to keep in mind. You may see some differences between what I'm seeing and what you're seeing. There is also a tool called Google Docs, which you may or may not be using. Google Docs works very similarly to Microsoft Word. And so a lot of people will use that instead because it's a free option, but it's all on the web. So you can do it all and it's automatically saved to the internet and you can access it from anywhere. Today, we are going to focus on Microsoft Word, but most of the things that we're doing in Microsoft Word, you can do right within Google Docs as well. And so I'll try to shift between the two so that you can keep them all straight. So we're going to start right at the top of the panel here. I'm just going to pop this down a little bit just so that you can see it there. So Microsoft Word, if you've taken any of our other Microsoft classes, you may have heard me talk about the ribbon, which is this piece right here. The ribbon is where you get most of the fun stuff that Word can do. Something to know about the ribbon is that the ribbon has multiple tabs to it. So if we were to take a look right here, you'll see insert and draw and design, all of these right here. Each of those, when you click on them, will do something different. So when I click insert here, you'll notice the ribbon changes. And if you keep an eye on it while I click draw and design and layout, it continues to change. And that's a good thing. That means that usually what you're looking for is right within here. So if you can't find it, you can browse through these menus here. Just to show you the slight difference in Google Drive when you're looking at a Google Doc, you have some of the key options right down here, and then you have those same insert, format, tools up at the top here, and those are drop-down menus. And what you can do if you can't find something in Google Docs, you can actually use this to search the menus and it will help you find something. So like if you wanted to change the margins on something, you could type in margins and it will start to show you page setup and headers and footers, which are some of the things you might be doing. All right. So this isn't going to be a typing class because we're going to come in knowing that you know some typing, but always a good idea to practice. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll feel with typing. But I'd want to show you a little bit about formatting here, some basic formatting that you'll use. So when you have a lot of text, and actually I'll use my sample document as an example here. When you have a lot of text, it's really hard to read when you've got just a wall of text. Sometimes, people think of it as, you look at a book and your eyes start to cross. And this is really a thing in Word documents. If you have a ton of text and it's small and it's all put together really tight, it can be really hard to keep everything straight. So what I like to do is when needed, when you need to have, say, a header, or maybe you want to have, you want to draw attention to specific pieces so that people can scan, you can highlight a section and just click and drag to get that gray highlight there. And you'll notice that it gives you the options, but they're right up here in the corner. You can, for instance, make this bold. Bold will make it stand out a little bit. You can bold it just like that. You can also do italicize, you can do underline. There's even a case, and occasionally I'll use this, where you can use the strike through, which just like puts a line through the text. You wouldn't use this except in cases where maybe you wanted to indicate that something was there but taken out. Something else to remember is that you want your paragraphs. So like I have my paragraph here. If I hit enter, now I have a nice space there in between that and the next section, which has a little title here that I've been made bold. Other things to note here, you can change the font at any time of what you're highlighting. I always tell people to stick with the very simple fonts. Often Microsoft Word will give you a million options, and some of them are readable and some of them are not. So definitely stick with a couple good ones. Some classics that people use are things like Times New Roman, Calibri is really common, or Calibri, sorry, Cambria, things like that. Comic Sans is one that you might hear people make some jokes about, but it's actually really good for people who are dyslexic. So fun fact, it can be really good for that. Though in most work environments, they ask that you use a different font. Arial is also a good classic clean font that people use a lot. But often I will just use the default font for wherever I am. So in this case, it would be Calibri or Cambria. But in other cases, I think if you look at your Google here, I don't think that they have a couple fonts here, but they've just got a couple basics here. But Arial and Cambria and Calibri are right up at the top. So other things to know, you might want to change the size. I recommend not going too small. It does give you the possibility to go all the way down to like 8, which can be really hard for people to read. I usually tell people 10 is like the minimum that you would want in terms of font. Even 11 or 12 are really nice on the eyes. In general, I always say the larger the font, the better for if it's a printout that people are reading. The larger you can make the font, the better if it fits on one page. The other thing you can do rather than, so let's say that I have this and I have this at 11 and maybe, I want that to be slightly larger. So I can make this 12, for instance. So now this and this are different fonts or different sizes rather. So if I highlight these like you're seeing here, you'll notice the font size goes away because it can't tell you which one it is because you're technically covering both. What you can do though, in this case, if you want to bump it up a notch, you can use the big A here and bump it down a notch. You can use the little a. These two here just allow you to upgrade or downgrade the text. And so in this case, this part will still be bigger, but they'll make them larger at the same time. And then you can do the same thing in the other direction. And you can do this with the same text too. So like if I take this whole section, sorry about that. If you take the whole section here, I can do the same thing. It's just you can also see the font as it goes. Just a neat little fact. Sometimes people will choose to highlight text. I tend to only use this in moderation because especially yellow can be really tough to read. But basically what this does is you can highlight a section like this and then click the little highlight button and it turns yellow. You can also, instead, you can click on it and then you can highlight that way. I find that I tend not to use it very much because it tends to look a little distracting and we don't print in color a lot. If you are printing in color, it can be nice in certain situations where you need to draw attention to things. But for the most part, I found people tend to use the bolding and the underlining and things like that. So something else that you can do to make your text stand out a little bit more, especially in cases where you have like large headers and you have like large sections that you're working off of, is you can use these pre-formatted areas here. That's this whole section right here. And the way that these work, these are pre-formatted and they're made for specific things. So you'll notice this one just says header. This one says heading 2, heading 3, heading 4. And then there's other ones here that you could use if you want to. And if I click on this, you'll notice I can click on this little thing. It will pop them all out so you can see them all. So there's a bunch of options here. So let's say, for instance, whoops, if I want this section here to be heading 2. You'll notice now it gives it a certain size. The cool part about using headings like this is that it also allows you, and I'll just put another one in there so that you can kind of see what this looks like. It allows you to make this collapsible. So if you have a really long document, you can collapse this up like that, and it will collapse the sections based on the header. So for instance, maybe I have a couple things to say in here. And so then, I'm going to come in here. And I'm going to grab this and make this heading 3. And then I have another section. I'm going to make this just regular text. But then I can come back here and make this another heading 3. So it will respect what you've got there. So it will go based off of the headers that you have. And then this one would collapse them all. So the headers collapse based on what they are. They're kind of nested in that way. This also works if you go over to Google Docs. This works the same way. So whoops, there we go. All right. So it works the same way. You can use the headings here. It's just under this heading drop down, but you have title, subtitle, heading, etc. And you can do the exact same thing. So I can take this, it's heading 3 now, and I could make it, heading 4. What you can do in Google too is there's an option for the document outline, which is this thing right here. And you can click on that and that will show you all of the headers that we've got here. And in this case, all the headers are heading 3, but if we decided to make one of them heading 2, it would be nested in a slightly different way. So you'll notice heading 1 is out there. If I made this heading 2, it'd be nested underneath. So you can see how they're nested. Just kind of a neat thing that you might want to try depending on what kind of thing that you're writing. And in general, I want to be clear that that's something that happens a lot. People will have different reasons for writing things. If you're writing a speech, you probably don't need to worry about this that much. But if you're writing a novel, or if you're writing something, larger, you might need to have headers in there to make it a little easier to follow. So something to keep in mind. All right. So a couple other things to note here. So we've got a lot of formatting going on in here, and you can use this formatting just like we've been showing you, but you can also get rid of formatting. So let's say that you have a document that's coming from someone else, or maybe you're putting together a whole bunch of submissions from other people and they all use different fonts and everything was a giant mess. What you can do is you can highlight everything, and just so you know, you can highlight just like I'm doing, clicking and dragging, or you can do Control A. Control A will select everything on the screen. So hold down the Control key and type A, and that will select everything on the screen. And then you can use this nifty little button right here, which is the Clear Format button. So this allows you to get rid of all of the formatting that's happened, including the headers. So you'll notice everything now is the same size and the same font, or at least it should be. And if it's not, what you can do is say, okay, well, I also want everything to be Cambria. And so now everything is Cambria, and we want it all to be, that. You can also do normal here. That normal one will bring everything up to the same. All right. So that's a super common piece to do. Now, I just realized I mentioned something that you may not realize that you can do, which is copying and pasting. So if you have a section that needs to be in a different paper, or it needs to be in an email, or you've written something and you want to move it to somewhere else, you can use copy and paste. And I would say I use copy and paste about 300 times a day, because I'm constantly moving things around. If I'm sending an email, then I need to send a little piece of it to someone else. Maybe I have a link for something. So if you learn these shortcuts, these keyboard shortcuts, you'll be able to do this a lot faster. So if I want to copy this little paragraph right here that I've got, what I can do is I can do Control C. Now, if I want to, I could come up here and click the button for copy, and that would be the exact same thing. There's nothing wrong with clicking the button, but I have found if you're doing it a lot, it makes it easier. You don't have to even look for the button. You can just do Control C, and it's been copied. I don't have to come up to the copy button at all. And then all I have to do is I have to click wherever I want it to go. So like maybe I want it to come down here in this little section that I have, and then I can do Control V, or I can click the paste button again. So something that you might want to do that's different. So you can do Control V, which will paste it as is, and then you could clear out the formatting. You can also, just as a tip here with copy paste, you notice this little down arrow. This allows you to paste in different ways. So you can paste it, and you'll actually see if you hover over them. Merge the formatting. You can do it as a picture. I usually do keep text only, because that takes out all of the filter, all of the formatting. You can just have it exactly how you want it. It'll just be clean. But you can choose whichever makes the best. So keep source formatting. The reason why you might find that if you're copying and pasting from a different environment, it might show up in like black highlighting or something silly like that. Sometimes formatting can be a little bit funny, especially if you're copying and pasting from a website. And of course, when I talk about copying and pasting, I do need to do a quick shout out. If you are copying and pasting, make sure you have permission to copy and paste the thing you are using. Please don't copy and paste other people's cover letters or other people's work, unless you know that you have their permission to do so, and that would never be the case in a cover letter situation. You'd only be copying your own things and moving them in. All right. So now that we've been playing around for a little bit, I'm going to show you one more thing before we take a break and let you practice. We're going to talk about your spelling check here. So some of you may find as you're writing, and you'll notice here, it's going to have a lot of misspelled words because I have a bunch of Latin nonsense in here. But when I have my English, there's a lot less that we're seeing here. But I want to tell you the spell check is your friend. It is always a good idea to run a spell check. You can always try it out, just see how things are going. But you can also just have, it will auto spell check as you go, and anything you see that's spell checked, it will say, hey, are you sure? And then you can choose to choose another word if it's found it there. I believe there is still a spell check button. And yes, if you type in spell at the top, you'll notice that right here you have spelling and grammar that shows up. And when you click on that, you can then go through and it will do a bunch of rating stuff. And you don't have to worry too much about this. Again, this is something that you may or may not decide you want, but it will just do a little test here. So maybe I want this to be casual writing. So you can do this spell check here. I do find that the typical spell check, which comes in, which is just with the red words, tends to cover most cases. And I also want to say that there are some cases where spell check may not figure it out, and grammar will take it over. So for instance, if you use the wrong version of a different word, so like there, and there, and you use the wrong there, that's a case where it might not pick it up, but the grammar check will often pick it up instead, and it will say grammar here instead. All right, so with that, we're going to allow you to pause now, take a couple minutes and try out some of the things we've talked about, either with the sample text we have or something that you're working on for yourself. Try changing the formatting, try using some of these header options up here at the top, try some copying and pasting and moving things around. And when you are all set, you can come back to the video and we'll continue on with some other things you might decide to use. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about bullets and numbering, which is another thing you can use to make your paper or whatever you're writing easier to read. When you're writing in paragraphs, sometimes you can't avoid it, but often when I'm taking notes, for instance, maybe I'm working with a new team and I want to learn more about what they're doing and I'm taking notes on things as I go, I like to use bullet points to do that. You also, if you need to have a numbered list, you have the option to do that. These are right up here at the top of the page. And so you can see them right at the top of the page here. And they're the same if you were to go into here. Now for your list items, they're going to show up right here. And they actually also have a checklist item option in Google Docs. So they'll work the same way. You're able to format them as you go. But they're pretty straightforward when you're working on them. So let's say that I'm writing something. I can just click on the bullets here and it will start with a bullet and I can type. And when I hit enter, I can type again, and it will give me a new bullet on each line every time you do a line. Now, if I continue to type and I have a bunch of things to say, I can continue on that line just like that. So we'll only do the bullet at the start of the line, no matter how long the line is. Now, this can be great, but sometimes you need nested bullets for what you're working on. So maybe I have kind of a sub point of this long point here. I can hit the tab key and that will move it in. Just so you know, instead of using the tab key, you can also use these buttons up at the top. One indents things in and one indents things out based on the way the arrow is going. I know it's a little small on my screen. I unfortunately can't make it bigger. These are also available in Google. So you have these options and they will allow you to move things out. So if I realize, I can just come back in even further and it'll work that way. Now, if I want to get back out now, so maybe I've finished my point, I hit enter once, enter again, and it will bring me back. So that's just how it ends up working, is that you hit enter. And this is one of those things that the more you play with it, the more comfortable you'll feel. And that's why I tend to use it for notes instead of pen and paper, because it's faster for me to type and I'm able to get things out very easily. You'll notice that the formats of these all look different. So like we have the dark dots here and then we have open dots. And if we keep going, so we got the little squares and then go back to dots. They do that on purpose to make it easier for you to see like what levels things are at. But if you don't like them and you want to change which ones, like maybe you want these to be something else, I can just click on them so that they all get highlighted. Do the same thing with the other ones if I wanted. But what you can do, whoops, let me click out. There we go. So we can click on these, and if I want to, I can click on the little drop down here, and I can change what this looks like. Maybe I want them to look different. So just to be fun, I'll use this colored option because I almost never get to use this. I typically just use the defaults. But what you can do is you can click on this, and now all the bullets are this little logo thing. And so if I could change these if I want to something else too, maybe I want these to be like that. And so you can actually see all of those options. And if you want to, you could even choose something else for a bullet. You could do define new bullet, but for the most part, I recommend just using the defaults. To be honest, if you get used to them, you'll have no trouble at all. And this carries over to so many tools. Any word processing or note-taking tool tends to have bullets and numbering, and they work the same way. Now, we were talking about bullets. Bullets are great when something is not an ordered list. That means, you don't have to go step 1 first and then step 2 and then step 3. But you would never use bullets for that kind of thing. Like if you were writing a recipe, you would use numbers. So you can do the same thing. You can click on numbers and it starts with number 1. And the same way, if you hit enter, you'll get a new number. If you tab in, you'll get ABC, and then you get Roman numerals. And I think it just goes back to, numbers after that. This is also a very common convention, but yeah, you can put everything in there. And if you decide, like, maybe for number 4 here, let's just back up a little bit. If I decided that, I wanted number 4 here to be bullets instead, I wanted A and B here to be bullets because they're not actually ordered, I can come over here, highlight them and click bullets. And now they're bullets. And then when I come back, you do sometimes run into issues with the numbering. So sometimes you may have to come in and click on the numbering and say, like, I need to change this from somewhere else. So I actually just right-clicked on there and did continue numbering, but you could also do restart at 1, or if it really isn't getting it, you can just say set numbering value and be like, I need this to be step 7. So you can play around with that. It tries to figure it out. Word does its best to be smart. So as much as it can, it will try to give you the right thing. So yeah, bullets and numbering I find are really, really useful. They are super helpful for being able to organize what your thoughts are. And the cool thing is that you can move stuff around after that. So like if I find that this point's really important, I could move that up to the top, and you'll notice I just clicked and dragged and hold it down there. So you can really move things around in a very nice and easy way. And especially if you need to make changes to things, it can be nice and easy. I've also found it's great for recipes. I know I threw that out there, but I bake a lot, and so I like to put that in there. All right. So speaking of organization, I also want to talk a little bit about different ways that you might want to write things. So we've been writing all with a left aligned view here. So everything starts over on this side, and as far as it goes over like that. You can see the left align. Sometimes you might need, so like in a recipe situation, you might want to center the title. So you can, I just double clicked on this line, by the way, to highlight it. That's another way to highlight, but you can click on that to center it. You can also do the right justification, which puts it over on the side there. So you can change things accordingly. So you can center a whole block of text or just one line. It really just depends on what is best for you. So centering is good. I do want to quickly talk about this, the justifying. This is something that sometimes happens in like novels. You might see this. I'll use my big text for this so you can get a sense for what this really looks like. What justifying does is it makes it so that both lines here are kind of nice, even straight lines. So it mucks with the spacing in between words. So if you're looking at words, there's a uniform amount of space in between each word. Justify plays with that a little bit to make it so that it looks like a nice even column of text. So I'll just show you what this looks like because it's one of those things that unless you see it, there you go. Now, it's often not noticeable, but if you have a small amount of text, it can be really obvious. And there are some people that are very picky about the spacing being the same between words. And so if you do this, it might not look right. So I tell people, unless you have a specific need for this, which, you know, in some sort of publication environments, they might tell you that you want something like this. If you do not have that kind of need, don't use this last one. Usually people use either the left or right justified, depending on what they're working on, but mostly people use the left justified. But I like to show everyone just in case, because you never know what you might need to do. And it's always a good trick, and I can bring it right back. So if you'll see me toggle back and forth, you can see how the spacing just changes a little bit. All right. So a couple other things that we want to talk about here are paragraphs. So first of all, I just want to quickly say when you have a paragraph, the convention is you hit tab once to make that paragraph, the first line indented. You can also still use that indenting option up here as well if you like that better than using your keyboard. But if you're typing, it tends to be nice to have that. So like this, you can see we've indented our paragraphs. It also helps. And then if you've got your headers too, it's even more obvious about what's going on there. Okay. Another thing is the spacing. Most of the time, you'll want your spacing to be fairly tight. You want to keep everything together. But sometimes you may be asked in a class or in certain types of writing, they may ask you for double spacing instead. Typically, so there's single spacing, which is very tight. If you look at this paragraph while I'm doing this, you'll see what they all look like. Single spacing is a little bit tighter than the default here. The default was 1.15, which gives it a little bit of room. 1.5 spaces. This is something some teenagers I know in high school, often they'll ask for 1.5 or double spaced things. I believe the reasoning behind that is especially in English classes, teachers want to be able to write notes and they don't want to be restricted to the margins. They want to be able to like point to something in the middle of the paragraph so they can write, and this just gives them the space to do that. I've never seen someone use the 3, but this is what I usually tell people is to use these rather than if I'm going in here hitting enter to go, because then you'll end up with kind of messed up spacing. So if you need there to be spacing in between your lines, use this option up here. Don't try to put them in yourself. Okay. So another thing that I want to show that I found is super helpful is using hyperlinks and images. So this is really great if you want to, you have a document that people are going to be seeing online, especially hyperlinks. Images, you could use those for anything. You might need to put a picture in. Just so you know how you can put in pictures, you can copy and paste an image directly into here if you want. So using that Control-C, Control-V to bring in an image. You can also do, and I'm just going to do it here so that you can see, insert pictures, and then you can say this device, this allows you to upload a picture from your computer. You can also use their collection of stock images or online pictures, which you can actually search for. So like if I do stock images, I'll just show you. So like if I have kitten, because that would be fun. All right, this one looks cute. So I can click on that kitten and then I can click insert. And now it's going to put the image directly into my, my paper here that I've got. I can make it smaller. So it's really big right now. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And you'll notice it has a little icon right next to it. This allows you to say what it's going to look like. Should it be inside the text? Should it be wrapped around the text? How should it look? And what I mean is when you put it in there, you'll notice there's like a big gap right here because of the way that it's showing up. But if I click on this, I can do this wrapping here. This will give it a little bit of room. This will wrap it a little tighter. And then you can also have it so it's floating directly on top of the text. So it's just on its own outside of the text, or whether it's floating inside of the text. So then when you move it around, it will move everything with it, which is kind of neat. So this can be really helpful if you're writing like a newspaper article or something, or a newsletter. You can actually put the picture wherever makes sense. Okay. And you'll also notice it when I'm clicking on the picture, it gives me this whole ribbon of stuff that I can do with the picture. You can play with this as much as you'd like. We're not going to go over it here because it's the same as other places where you'd be able to make images, but you can add like a border or do anything like that all up in here. So there's lots of things you can play with in here, and I always encourage people to play around. But before you play around here, I want to show you one more thing before I, again, give you a little break to play around, which is adding a hyperlink. So let's say that you have something really cool that you want to put in here and you have a link to it. What you can do is you can hyperlink text. So some of you may have seen that if you go and you're going to, go to Google, for instance, I'm just going to use Google as an example. Maybe you want to link people to google.com. I could, put in a link just like this. So I could just copy and paste, Control C, Control V, this link right in here. And then as soon as I have it there, it's good to go. I tend to tell people to do it a little differently. So I like to hyperlink the actual text because I've found that URLs can look a little gnarly. They look a little, I don't know, I don't find them they look as pretty as I'd like them to. But what you can do is you can choose specific text. So if I have this specific piece of text here, I can then, if I right click on this, I can do link. This will allow me to hyperlink. You can also use Control K to do this. So Control K will allow you to link. And then what you can do is you can paste the address or type the address right into there. And when you click OK, it shows up in this blue font and it's ready to go. It's hyperlinked into your document. So Control K is the way that I do it. Highlight the text, Control K. So I write everything out and then I hyperlink after the fact. You can also just link. So if I do link like this, I can do text to display right up at the top here. And then I paste the address in. All right. Okay. So with that, I'm going to give you a few minutes to play. So feel free to pause the video now and check out some of the things that we've talked about. Copying and pasting. Remember, Control C, Control V, your bullets and numbering. Let's try your aligning and indenting and your hyperlinks. And then once you come back, we will get back into it. All right. All right, so the next two things that we're going to be talking about are things you may or may not need. That's kind of the theme of this, is that you won't necessarily be using every single one of these skills that we're talking about here every time that you go into Microsoft Word. That would be a little crazy if you did, but I want to make sure you're prepared in cases where you may need to use them. So for instance, one of the things that you may use, depending on what you have to do, is you may need to use a header or a footer. So the way that you get to the header and footer, and it was so quick that I'll just do it again as an instant replay here, come up to the top part of the page and just double click. So click twice real fast, And you've got your header option here, and you can put something in here. So you can put in an address or a company logo or anything that you need to put in here. You can also align things accordingly. So like, for instance, if I need to format this so that it's aligned over to this side, I can do that. So that's something that you can do to put in your header here. Just a trick, and I actually do this on my own resume, although I haven't used it in a bit, but what you can do is you can put your address and your contact information, whatever you're putting your introductory information, like your name and stuff like that. I put that stuff in the header instead of using this, and it's a bit of a space saver if you put it up in the header, and it kind of sets it apart from everything else. So just kind of a neat thing. And then when I click out, you'll notice it shows up in this kind of gray color. So just something to keep in mind, but it can come back up here at any point, right click, or you can double click and get out here. You can do the same thing with the footer. So if I come down to the bottom, it's open, I can use that as well. And again, you can insert a logo, you can insert an image, whatever makes sense. So that's one thing that you may or may not use. And the cool part is once you put it on one page, it's on every page. So it will automatically have all of that information on there. Another thing that I'm seeing people use less and less is stuff around printing. I just want to talk about this a little bit because there are still many places where in office jobs where you need to print things. There are some offices you'll work at where nobody prints anything. And there are some offices where everything needs a hard copy, especially legal for law firms and things like that. But I want to quickly show you some things you may want to know about how all of this works. So we're going to check this out in layout. So we're going to go over to the layout tab. That's going to bring me to our margins and our size of our paper and things like that. So first, let's start from over here. So if we go to the size here, you can choose. So for instance, if you need a legal size paper, which is longer, you can go to the legal option. You can change, and there's more paper sizes as well. So you can pick whatever you're using. By default, it's going to go to 8.5 by 11 because that's the standard. But there might be some situations where you need to print on something smaller or larger. The other thing I want to show you is orientation here. So this is just portrait or landscape. That's either long ways or wide. So you can use one of these. Again, typically portrait, sometimes landscape, just depends on your use case here. Another thing is margins. Often people will ask for 1-inch margins all around. I'll say that both in high school and college, that was always what my professors and teachers wanted. However, there are some cases where people want more generous margins, so they want more space, like moderate here. I've also found that, like, especially for things like resume writing, you might want to make those margins a little tighter, which is this narrow option. When you use narrow here, it makes it 1/2-inch margin. So you're able to use a little bit more of this white space here. So for instance, I'll just do it so you can see what it looks like. It's really easy to then undo. So you could just come back here and say, no, I want normal. So you can try it out and see if it gives you enough of what you're looking for. So yeah, these are really common for people to use, and they're all in the layout tab. And again, if you can't find them, it's totally okay to look for them. So for instance, if I'm on home here and I come up to the search here, I can put in margins and it will be like adjust margins and it will figure it out. You can also do things like, size. I do that a lot. I type in here and it will figure out what I'm talking about up here. And so you can do choose page size and it will actually do it right from here. So that's from that search button up at the top. All right. And so just going back to Google Docs here, I'm just going to pull over my document. So I'm pretty sure you can do all the same things. What you can do if you're looking for like margins and stuff, you'll have headers and footers. Page setup, I believe, is where you get, yeah, there's where you define, they'll just have you define the measurements. So like 0.5 here, you would put in if you want them to be smaller or bigger, your paper size here, your orientation. So you would do all of that in here and then just click OK. And so that's all in page setup. All right. So a couple more little tricks that I want to show you. So we've got lots of cool stuff in here that we've been playing around with. I want to talk about page breaks. So this is something you may have not needed to use. In a lot of cases, you're just writing an essay and it needs to just go and go and go. But maybe you're writing a book and you're at the end of a chapter and you want them to actually turn the page to go to the next chapter. That's the most common time for this, but also like very formal, long essays, especially in like college level courses. Sometimes professors will ask you to do that. But what you can do is, let's say that I have this section here and I want this to start on another page. Now, you could, although I do not recommend it, and I'll show you why in a second, some people, if they need that to start on the next page, they'll come here and they'll hit enter, 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 enter all the way down until it ends up on another page. And that works for a second, but if you're just doing that, what's going to happen is when I come down here and I start to type more, you'll notice it's getting pushed down on the page here. And that's super annoying. Like you don't want that to happen because then you're just going to have to change it and move it around. So a much easier way of doing this, and I'm just going to move it all the way back up, is instead of having all of that, you're going to come right here and you're going to do a page break. So you can do this in the insert section. I believe it's also, yeah, it's in the layout section as well. They try to make it really easy for you to find things. But what you can do is you can do insert page break. Page break will move it to the next page. And the cool part about that is that now, if I come back here and I start to type, it's not going to mess with it. And if I happen to get to the point where this pushes it, it will push it all the way to the next page. So it's always going to be on a different page, no matter how much you add in there. So that's what that page break is really there for. Super, super useful in those cases where you need to, get rid of you need to have a chapter or something like that. All right. Another thing that some people need, I only bring it up as kind of a throwaway item here because it's uncommon, but some cases will call for this. You can add page numbers if you want to. So if I want to, I could just type in here page numbers. And you'll notice I have add page numbers, and you can choose all sorts of things about these page numbers. So for instance, you can say top of page, bottom of page. Maybe I want them on the left side, maybe I want them in the middle, maybe I want them on the right. You can actually see what they look like here. You can also do format page numbers so you can see how they look. So that's just kind of a nice thing. You can do like ABC or 1, 2, 3 with Roman numerals, things like that. So you can choose all of those things in here. And sometimes page numbers are important. So some people will use them. It just depends on the use case here. But you can do them just by doing, if you type up at the search here, if you start to put in numbers, you'll see page numbers. You can also see numbering, which is an actual step-by-step. Okay. All right. So we have 2 more things that we're going to cover here today. These are also things that I think will save you some time, especially this next one. So when you have a really long document, like you can see, I have a ton of things here, and I'm going to pick a random word. I'm going to pick widow because I have that word here. I'm going to use that. This is a bunch of nonsense text that I found just for our examples here, but I'm going to use the word widow. maybe I realized that that word wasn't the word that I wanted, and I wanted to go find where I mentioned it. Maybe I wanted to find where I mentioned it so that I can show someone a specific piece of what I was writing. Maybe I want to find it so that I can change it to something else. You can do that. What I use is something called the find and replace. So this is another keyboard shortcut, Control F. This allows you to search for something. So if I search for the word widow, and I think I'll have it multiple times because I copied and pasted the same stuff, but you can actually see we have 24 results and we can go in and change them just like you're seeing here. So I could skip to those pieces, and this will work in a lot of places, by the way. Control F works on the internet. If you're looking for something in a long web page, you can do the exact same thing. I use it all the time. It's super helpful to be able to find things. Now there's also find and replace. So if I were to type into here and I do find, and you'll notice replace is an option. And with replace, what you can do is maybe every time I said the word widow, I actually wanted something different. So this is where if I use that, I could do widow and I want to replace it with widow something else. Find and replace is very powerful, but also very literal. It will look for the word widow and it will change it everywhere that you have the word widow. So maybe widow is actually supposed to be capitalized for some reason. I could type in widow just like that, and then I can do replace the single time or replace all, and it will replace them all. And it's going to start and go all the way down the pages, but it's not doing the top stuff. So I'm going to continue from the top, and now it did it all. So this is a really great and useful thing. However, it only works on times where it finds widow. It will not find misspelled versions of widow and things like that. There's actually a funny little story, and I'll show you the little Office clip that I have. For anybody who's a fan of the TV show The Office, I'm a huge fan. You might remember this clip, but for those of you who don't, all you really need to know is that the boss often makes a lot of faux pas. He's kind of a silly guy and he does a lot of silly things. And his staff found this screenplay that he created, and he was using a find and replace to change someone's name. There was a character that he's portraying in not such a great light, and he's using a find and replace to change that character's name to something else. So I'm going to just quickly show you the clip so that you can get a sense for it if you'd like. Whoops. Sorry about that. There we go. All right. So we're going to start this kind of from the middle here, but they are reading the screenplay. The boss is out of the office, but the boss wrote the screenplay. Everybody's reading it. And they're all being a little silly, but we'll get to see his little run-in with that.
Michael's movie? 2 thumbs down.
A man sitting several seats down who has a gold face turns to Michael Scarn. Oscar, you want to play Golden Face?
Mr. Scarn, perhaps you would be more comfortable in my private jet.
Yes, perhaps I would, Golden Face. Sam, get my luggage.
I forget it, brother.
Samuel, you are such an idiot. You are the worst assistant ever. And you're disgusting. Dwigged? Wait, who's Dwigged?
Here's what we think happened. Michael's sidekick, who all through the movie is this complete idiot who's causing the downfall of the United States, was originally named Dwight, but then Michael changed it to Samuel L. Chang using a search and replace, but that doesn't work on misspelled words.
Leaving behind one Dwigged.
And Dwight figured it out. Oops.
D-W-I-G-H-T. Okay, you know what? I am done with this.
So that's Dwight. He's not very happy that the boss was using that to make fun of him. So yeah, so that's something it's a silly way of doing it, but just so you know, you want to be very careful with find and replace, that you're not expecting too much of it. So for instance, this is all fancy British text, so they spelled things kind of in a different way, but this word humored here, that's not how we spell it. So that's a case where we might decide that we want to change that to a regular spelling, or we want to do a find and replace for both spellings if we think that there might be discrepancies there. All right. So we have one more topic to talk about today, and it's just something that may come up depending on what sort of things you're writing. There may be times where you need to draw attention to a block of text or a sentence or whatever it might be. So maybe I have this block of text here and I would like to change that around a little bit. What I can do is I can use the borders here to add a border around it. So for instance, if I want to do all borders or outside borders, this is going to automatically put a box around that information. So it's just a nice, easy way for you to draw attention to that. And you can even change it. So if I have this here and I want this to look a little bit different, I could actually go into borders and shading. This would allow me to make it thicker. Maybe I want to have it be a nice thick box, and maybe I want it to be dotted lines. I can choose all of that from within here. So for instance, it could look like this. So that's something that you may or may not be able to not run into, that you might need to use, but I do want to point it out as an option here that you could use that to really emphasize a specific thing. Sometimes this comes at like the top of a document or at the bottom of a document, like you have a specific thing that you want to say that you want to kind of separate from everything else. So you might have a introduction, or maybe you're writing a test and you have like the instructions are at the top in a nice box, and then you have your problems 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever it might be. So that's something that you may decide to use. But anyway, so those were all of the topics that we were going to cover today. I hope that this has helped you learn some new things about Microsoft Word. It's something that you should just be, the more you practice, you will get more and more comfortable with it. Obviously, do reach out to the BRAC Career Center and the Natick Service Council if you have questions or want to learn more. We do also have an advanced session where we cover more complicated stuff. So if you're interested in that, we do have that recording available as well. Just reach out to your contact at the BRAC Center to make that happen.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for all this great content you covered today. As Sarah mentioned, we do have other recordings, including more advanced Microsoft Word and also some Excel classes as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to me or just pop on our website to find any of that content. So thank you again, Sarah. I hope you all are taking away some good nuggets. I know that I am, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.